So, welcome everybody. I'm so excited to welcome you to the Visions for Representation in Fashion panel. My name is Ariele, and I will be moderating this panel of my esteemed colleagues here. I'd love to introduce to you the wonderful panelists, starting first with Allison Coe, who is a senior at FIT, majoring in fashion design with minors in art history, and international trade and marketing. She's a peer mentor on campus and an active member of the Sustainability Council, both of which allow her to give back and to support the community around her. She is passionate about functional fashion and enjoys upcycling existing garments in her personal design work. In the coming future, she plans to enter into the active and outdoor sector, bringing a fresh perspective and urgency of environmental polarization. Next, we have Giana Pilar González, who works and plays with brands, technology, and cultural systems. She researches, analyzes, and remaps codes and structures to create new possibilities for participation and creative dialogue. This manifests as experiences, engagements, and products that challenge everyday people to reinvent the systems they encounter. Within her practice, Giana blurs the lines between art and commerce, digital and analog, couture and homespun culture, and uses art as a context for open experimentation and exchange. Her artwork has been featured in exhibits at IBEAM and MIT, and publications such as Wired UK, Hurriyet, and Fashion Practice. Giana holds a bachelor in architecture from Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and a master's from the Interactive Telecommunications program at Tisch School of the Arts at NYU. She currently lives and works in New York City and is the founder of Tio Santos, an experimental design studio based in Brooklyn. And our final panelist is Mimi Plunge, award-winning Ghanaian American designer and unfashioned visionary. Mimi Plunge launched her lifestyle brand in 2010 after a decade working in the New York fashion industry. Plunge's designs have been sold in luxury boutiques in the United States, Kuwait, Qatar, and she has shown her collections in New York, Sweden, South Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, Paris, and Nigeria. Her many partnerships include collaborations with famed shoe designer Manolo Blahnik, the iconic furniture brand Roche Bobois, Instagram, and most recently, LeBron James and Nike Basketball. Mimi Plange's designs have been worn by First Lady Michelle Obama, Vanessa Hudgens, Serena Williams, Terry Hatcher, Rihanna, Gabrielle Union Wade, Paris Hilton, Viola Davis, Regina King, Janelle Monáe, and Aquafina for her very first Screen Actors Guild Awards. She is a graduate of San Francisco's Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising and holds a degree in architecture from the University of California, Berkeley. And to give you a brief background about myself, my name is Ariele Laya. I am the Assistant Director of the Fashion Law Institute here at Fordham Law. And I'm also the creator and adjunct instructor of the course Cultural Awareness, Design Responsibility, and the Law that is taught at FIT. Previously, I worked as an assistant curator at the museum at FIT and had the pleasure of co-curating numerous exhibitions, including Global Fashion Designers and Black Fashion Designers, which feature the work of Mimi Plunge. So I would love to get started. First of all, welcome to the wonderful panel. Really looking forward to having this incredible conversation. And I'd first like to start with having a little bit of background about your work and explaining a little bit about how you approach design. So Allison, could we please first start with you?
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful introduction. So here are just a few visuals kind of going into what I really love to do as a designer and something that I've been exploring through my time at FIT. So if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see a bit more of the process. This is one of my projects. Thinking about sustainability, I want to target really sourcing fabrics in a different way, not just going to the fabric store and purchasing a roll but actually thinking about using what's already been created and something that other people don't want. So in a lot of my work, I source old garments from Goodwill, thrift stores, and I upcycle it into something new. And this is one example, as well as on the next slide. This has been something that I really enjoy doing. I really enjoy the process and being able to create something that looks really beautiful, and you wouldn't have guessed that it's out of these sweaters that people don't want anymore.
Wonderful. And Giana, we are going to start with a video from you. If you give me 1 minute.
I grew up just outside the Panama Canal Zone, a U.S.-controlled territory fenced off by barbed wire. We weren't allowed in, but the lifestyle filtered out to us through television. I felt I was absorbing something without being able to participate in it. Agua de Carnaval is my way of exporting the essence of Panamanian identity by inviting everyday Panamanians to be part of the process of defining it. The project started with my impressions visually represented as a conceptual map meant to be reshaped and expanded by viewers.
En la provincia de Cosanta de las Tablas, el mejor carnaval. Cuando hablamos de vendedores, no solamente de comida, sino también la gente que vende para los niños, los fuegos artificiales.
Resbalosos, personajes que impartían terror a los jóvenes. ¿Cómo era el sonido?
Es la figura de Janet Pontes Marín, que se dice que en los años más o menos 1982 fue reina de calle abajo de las tablas y fue la primera mujer que se disfrazó, y a partir de allí cambió el rumbo de todo lo que fueron los carnavales en la.
As I move through the ritual of Carnival, I find order through the chaos. I see and document viewers' stories and my own. I let loose and embody the experience.
And Giana, I believe you're also going to be sharing a few slides with us as well.
Yes. Hello, everyone. It's really great to be here. And as you can see, I am from Panama, but based in New York for 17 years now. And the project that you just saw is a piece called Agua de Carnaval. And just to give an intro, my practice is quite diverse, and there are many topics that excite me, specifically around the idea of creating awareness of different issues and the way that we live our lives as human beings, that sometimes, that we could make it better, that we can create more consciousness about the resources that we have. So one angle has been sustainability around water and looking at how culturally we relate, but also the issue of representation into mapping the Panama brand for export so we can make better sense, so the world can know about my culture. So I will just share really briefly some of the fashion work that laid the foundation for these maps that I create. And really briefly, I'll showcase this map around the strategy about a project that I've been developing named Hacking Couture. And Hacking Couture really looks at the culture of how we copy each other, and applies this culture of fashion of constantly copying each other with the world of open source development, and how in open source, developers are constantly copying, but there's a syntax and there's a structure into how they do that. So part of the project, and let me just zoom out for a second, you have this big kind of strategy map. I was trying to make sense of what this project Hacking Couture, because part of it is hacking the idea of cutting and pasted fashion, but also hacking the system of fashion. So for example, here you see the resemblance between Burberry and Coach. And this is a moment of that comparison, and perhaps the visual relationship that we have between the plate and the tartan, the ads, and the trench and the distribution that it has. But what I created this project is because I'm not a fashion person, but I love fashion and I wear clothes. And the fact that I wear clothes already puts me as part of the system, right? And some of the activities that happen in the project is that we remix and recode through workshops. I open source. Basically, I do some reverse engineering of, for example, what Chanel might mean, and we do a DIY workshop. So, for example, then I also develop performances in which I might emulate the ad, and I try to become and find energy to carry on in my daily life into all this communication that the fashion system is having with me. Specifically here, the values of the project, this was really important, and empower everyone to engage with fashion. So the idea is, if we can be aware of how things are made, we might make better decisions into the things that we put on. A peer-to-peer relationship, right? How I can connect with other designers, but also a peer-to-brand collaboration. So the top and the bottom can connect. Celebrate creativity, build community, design literacy, and also other goals, which is hacking the traditional fashion forecasting system. What happens when you engage your consumers or your users instead of producing an incredible amount of clothes that then goes into a discount store, right? Can we have a more meaningful production cycle? Create new experiences around fashion. And I do this, and specifically in this project, through the mapping of what is the fashion codes, what makes Chanel unique, what makes Mini Plange unique, what makes Adidas unique, and how that could become a language of creation. That's when you see the symbol here of the database. Also a person's code, right? To lead to a peer-to-peer atelier that could lead into digital self-production, do-it-yourself, Creative Commons, retails, and brand modules. So I know that was a lot of information, but in a way, this is within my creative practice to bring together a diversity of opinions and a diversity of ideas that usually would not be part of an art piece or part of a fashion experience.
Giana, I appreciate the systematic approach you take in incorporating lots of different forms of representation. So next, I would like to move on to showing some of the work of Mimi.
So hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Ariel, and thank you everyone at FIT and our awesome panel. I'm happy to be with you guys here today. So a lot of our work that we do, just Mimi Plunge in general, it's really about storytelling. And here in this image, one of the main things that we talk about, I'm originally from Ghana, and I like to invite people into stories of Africa in a way that's kind of subtle, and sometimes they don't even know that they're coming into it if they're looking at it without, you know, the images that I have next to into the garment that I was inspired by. So a lot of my work comes from looking at Africa from pre-colonial time and looking at what was being done to the body before there were actual Western type clothing introduced on the continent. And so a lot of those things come around scarifications, they come around piercings and painting on your body and things like that. And this is mainly scarification. that we're seeing here. And so that's where a lot of the leathers and the skins kind of come as an inspiration for what I do, which is mimicking things that Africans would do to their skin and transferring it to real skin, which in my case is leather, and telling the stories that way. And so we make everything here in New York, and everything that we do is with a sustainable approach. I wouldn't call ourselves a sustainable brand just yet, but I think that that's something that we're working towards. And that's through our work process and being able to have a very slow kind of work process. And we don't produce a lot of garments at once. And also being able to really, to just, connect with the work that we do and have an artisanal kind of craftsmanship kind of vibe to it that really, comes from Africa. And when we get into this is more recent work, again, this is also always telling the stories of Africa in a very like abstract kind of modern kind of way. So we use like this is a theme of masquerade, which a lot of masks and outfits come into play in the cultural context, and just kind of like really modernizing it in a way that if you just saw the dress without the inspiration in the background, you may not know where it comes from. And so it's always being able to tell the subtle story so that when somebody comes in, then they're introduced into, where these ideas are actually coming from. And if we go on to the next slide, we can look at this collection, which was called Unfashion, which was the start of when I think we were coming up with like, what is our brand really, like the essence, the energy, the story that we're trying to tell, what does it kind of like live around? And it's this idea of, being unfashioned, not being boxed in, not having any kind of real system to the way that we're working, but being able to work in a way that, is not defined by anyone else but ourselves. And even with clothing, I don't like to dictate to people like you should be wearing this, wearing that. It's a very personal expression that we're always pushing for. And this particular collection came at a time when I found that there were a lot of samples that I kind of had, and I decided to remake this whole collection with all of our old garments instead of having samples laying around. And so this was based off of the Nuba tribe, which does a lot of painting, body painting on themselves. And we decided that, we would paint the garments, we would deconstruct them, we would put them back together. And so that's where this collection came into play. And I think on the last slide, you can kind of see how we also use leather. These are all leather scraps that we've had in laying around, and just trying to purpose them again and making something that was really unique and really fun and very special. And just being able to use what's laying around. And there wasn't any method to the color system or this being here or that being there, but I just kind of felt like it would work out in the end anyway. And so it's just kind of approaching design in a very refreshing way that you don't feel bogged down by any rules, bogged down by any kind of systems that you have to work in, or it has to look this way, or it has to be this category or that category. We do high end, we mix it a lot with a little bit of streetwear in there as well. And that's what we do. Yeah, so this is just another look on the actual street. This was from an editorial this year. So it was just mixing some of that same collection, unfashioned, but just how it's kind of worn on the street.
Wonderful. Mimi, those designs are so bright, so happy. They always make me smile when I see your work, and definitely ushering in spring. So I would love to start the conversation with similar to sustainability, representation can have so many different definitions and meaning. How do you personally define representation?
Anyone? Okay, I'll start. Well, I mean, for me, representation is just really, it's first of all, it starts with you. It's being yourself and defining like who you want to be based off of your own self and not the surrounding around you and being caught up in, what's going on around you. I think that that's very, very important to have respect for everyone else and have a real curiosity to meet new people and see new people and to present yourself. And I think in the workspace, representation becomes, it can become a thing where sometimes it's like, okay, well, we just need to see a lot of bodies, but I think it needs to go a little bit deeper than that, than just like seeing a lot of different bodies and different people. I think like with all of us who have ideas to have our own companies and our own businesses, we're the ones who are starting, with this energy of what we want our businesses to be about. And so if the person at the very top doesn't have that energy of, You know, I want to build an inclusive place for people to feel comfortable in this place. And we're just bringing people into a place that is not that energy. I don't know if that means representation to me, but I think that it kind of has to stop at the very top for it to be real. And I think that people who are CEOs and people who are presidents and people who are, you know, in those kind of positions, they need to be people who are cultured themselves. You know, I'm not talking about race here. I'm talking about you have to be a type of person that has been around different types of people and is culturally aware. And I think that that should be part of the requirements that are go into those positions.
That's an excellent point. Allison, Giana, any thoughts on how do you define representation personally?
I really like what Mimi said about like starting from the top. I think within a company, like you can have like all these employees who are different, but if it doesn't start from leadership and trickle down, then you don't have the results that you're hoping for. But I think whenever I think of the word representation, I think about differences, like different backgrounds, different personalities, different working styles, just having something that is more unique to each person and being able to use all those differences to work towards a common goal. I think whenever you're in a room full of people who are all like have the same artistic style or just the same background and upbringing, there's not really as much room for growth or change. And it's a lot harder for that to just come out of nowhere. So I think when you start with a group full of people who are all inspired, motivated, and everything, I think that's a really like great opportunity for something new and exciting to happen.
Absolutely. And Gianna, what are your thoughts on representation and how you define it?
Well, uh, I think for me, to be able to have representation, you need to have space and you need to be able to have time to integrate, right? So, um, in my corporate experience, those have been the most successful projects when people are able to really listen. People at the top and people at the bottom. Because if people at the bottom get angry, that doesn't help either. And if the people at the top are not open-minded enough, like Mimi and Allison mentioned, then it's just going to always be this disconnect between the top and the bottom. So it also takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of guts for people at the top to embrace new initiatives. And sometimes not embracing those initiatives is because there's no clarity into the mission of the business. And being able to first be very, very clear because when we go to work for a client or when we go to collaborate, we need to have values completely aligned. Otherwise, it's going to become complete chaos. That has been my experience too. So I think to be able to have inclusion and representation, things needs to be in order. Things need to be very clearly communicated, and there needs to be a framework for participation. And I know this sounds very abstract, but to be very specific, if someone has an idea and it's a good idea onto how to make something better, how does the system in that organization allows that idea to flow to the top, and it doesn't matter where it comes from, right? So in a lot of the times, the people at the bottom, when we don't see people like us at the top, it's very hard to navigate those networks, right? So in a way, we need to have a mirror effect of we don't all need to be the same, but we need to have a channel. And if I see a woman, it's most likely that I could feel a little bit more open. Or on the other hand, is to not really care, to just go for it and just speak up. I've had to deal with both experiences. So that was long-winded answer, but yes, space and time to integrate.
Yeah, and I love that idea of in a lot of your work, there's always some sort of structure to it. And I think that that's so important in really eliminating bias, that if you didn't know where an idea came from, if it came from a VP or if it came from an intern, the idea of having those actual structures in place where those ideas can actually come forth is a really wonderful idea. So that kind of leads me to and echo with something that Allison actually said in a Teen Vogue article. Allison, you had said, quote, one thing that motivates me is seeing people that look like me in these executive positions, even though there are not nearly enough. Seeing that they've done it before makes me want to be there as well. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And why is representation important and what are the benefits of it? Allison, can you hear us?
I'm so sorry. It's been cutting out. I
Oh,
didn't
no.
hear your last question.
Oh, I was just I was re-quoting you about your quote from Teen Vogue and about representation, and when you see it in these executive positions, it makes you want to rise to that level. Can you explain a little bit about what is the importance of representation, and elaborate a little bit more on the quote that you had put in Teen Vogue?
Yeah, so I think this kind of connects to what Giana actually just said, just being able to see yourself at the top, whether it's like a woman or someone who's Asian or a person of color, just seeing like more physical proof that it's been done before, it's possible. I think that is something that I find really inspiring, especially in my experience being able to work with these people who have gone through kind of like started as an intern, worked their way up and just hear how they did it. That is something that really motivates me personally. And I think that is important for younger generations, especially to see also just looking at different companies and how they do value all people and they're willing to promote and put different people in different positions, even if it may be a risk for them. I think it's something that is really good progress and it is inspiring and yeah.
Absolutely. And Mimi, you were talking about the importance, which I think is such a great point about how CEOs and people in leadership, how they need to be culturally aware. Can you talk a little bit about when you're thinking of maybe doing a collaboration or just the work that you do yourself, when you're thinking of representation, what does that look like when you're either collaborating or maybe in the casting or how you're putting together a collection? What are some of the things that you think about?
Hmm. Well, I mean, honestly, I don't work from that being the first thing, you know. That's not I think about the scope of the project because I'm already the person who is a minority, you know? So I'm whatever's coming out of me already, I'm looking at it like, you know, it's already coming from a diverse perspective, you know, because that's me. And it's about me being able to tell, you know, the story the right way. But what I do like to do is like work with like interns and stuff and let them have access to me so that maybe if they don't know you know, how to get into something or they feel like, you know, maybe they'll feel more comfortable asking. I like, you know, to work in that way. But as far as collaborations go, I think if you just have, I mean, I'm the mindset you just have to go for it, you know, no matter what. Even if there's people that don't look like you there or anything like that, I think that, you know, for me, it's I'm going for it anyway because I'm gonna get it, you know? And that's how I approach and that's how I think of everything because I grew up in a space where I always grew up around a lot of different types of people, you know, um and I'm comfortable with a lot of different types of people too, you know. And so the thing is, but I understand that everyone isn't. And I think that the most important thing is to always, you know, if you do your best work, I personally feel like it does come down to product and like how you present yourself at the end of the day, you know. And I think because you can't try to place people places, you know, just because. And in my opinion, there's enough minority people who are way talented who deserve it without you even having to think of, I'm giving somebody an opportunity. They don't need, like, there's people out there who are up to par, you know, it's not, that's not the perspective I'm looking at it from, but I'm looking at it from, you know, people who are maybe editors or people who are, you know, buyers and people like that taking chances on smaller designers. it's their job to go out and look for people. You know, it's their job to go out and discover people. But if you yourself, you don't have the right kind of thinking and you're very limited in your scope, or when you're looking for a Black designer or an Asian designer or um, 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 any designer, you just pick up the phone and maybe call like your one friend who's a minority and say, hey, do you know any designers? You know, that's not the way to work. You have to do the work the same way you would looking for anybody. And so again, to me, the problem will always be there if the people who have the opportunity to make space, if they're the kind of people who would never make space, I just don't see the problem in the long term. Maybe short term, yes, but in the long term, I don't see it really getting better. And I think that those are the things, those are conversations that we need to have. I think a lot of times we talk about how to, you know, more representation, bring people in, this and that. And that part is fine too. But I think what's more so important is the people who are in those positions actually having some kind of empathy, having some kind of understanding, having some kind of, you know, knowledge that, you know, there are actually, you know, people of other races that are highly talented and you need to go out there and find them. You know, having some kind of that instead, I think that is more the thinking that I have. But I mean, I feel like, you know, I'm here for, you know, anyone who wants to come and ask questions and things like that, because it is a very difficult space to navigate through. That I will say for sure, you know, but I think that it's also space that if you don't just push yourself, no matter who's in front of you, it's going to be difficult, because fashion is a place where people are always kind of trying to tear you down, you know, so you have to be that kind of person. So that has to be first. And then everything else can come, you know, after that.
Absolutely. And I love that kind of, if we could say like a two-prong approach, or the different perspectives, both from a designer, but then also from the people who are in those leadership positions. The idea of doing your work. I mean, so many people, I've heard it over the past few years, and they're like, I don't know where to start. And it's like, open a book, Google, find a designer, learn about them. And I think that people, one of the things we were talking about is just putting in the work. If you can't put in the work, you can't expect somebody else to do it for you. So love those points. If we move on to the idea of access, Mimi, you started to bring up the idea of access for interns or for people getting into the industry. I'd love to talk a little bit more about how can we improve access? Does it start at the education level? Does it start at the intern level? What are your thoughts about providing more access? Giana, you've started to kind of do that with a lot of the different projects and things like that. But I'd love to hear, what are some of the ways if people are wanting to provide that? How do we do it?
It's a pretty big, bold question. And I think that's why I'm not a traditional fashion person, because fashion, first of all, this idea of exclusivity gave me such an allergic reaction. And also to think that you will go and become a slave for the art of it. And I did internships in fashion. I interned for fashion production, and it was just, they were God, you know? And I had this idea planted in my head from reading magazines back in Panama, like this idea of European fashion. So I think, to come back to your question, is, I don't know how to answer that, to be honest, because it's so big and bold, but I think demystifying the fashion world and demystifying what it means to be part of it. And there's so many sub-tribes around it. And does it mean that I am part of fashion because I started to morph my body? So I look, you know, I have plunge lips and I have more of a Instagram account, which is, you know, if I look like a Kardashian, right? Like that's a way of participating in fashion. It's still the same model of, I need to lose weight so I could be like the image that I'm presented. It's not as straightforward and distributed. And Ariele, you have to remind me the question, because it was so big and I'm just giving you a lot of thoughts. So please remind me.
Absolutely. It was just to keep it very simple, is how do we improve access into the fashion industry?
Yes. So I think anybody's welcome in fashion. That's the beauty of fashion and art. We all wear clothes. So I think it's a mind shift. I belong. I belong. And I have to remind myself that, because at points I feel that I don't belong, that I'm doing this art stuff that are related to fashion, that are non-fashion. And then I really need to catch myself that I wear clothes, so I belong. The moment I buy something that is fast fashion, the moment that I look at myself in the mirror, put myself. So if somebody wants to create a career out of something, and it's just like Mimi said, is like, you gotta go for it, right? When there are no models like you, of course, it's a lot more difficult to see a vision materialize. But just go for it. I would say it's an easy as creating an Instagram account nowadays. It's harder. There's a lot more people. There are a lot more fishes, but more than ever now, we are all rethinking what fashion means and what fashion is and how it is produced. So this is a really exciting time to dive into it. And even if it's just personal expression, it still counts.
Absolutely. And Allison, as somebody who is an undergraduate student and entering in, what are some suggestions or things that you would like to see, or maybe some challenges you've had in trying to get into the industry?
Yeah, I think especially as someone who is just starting out with maybe not as much experience, internships can be like a big area of like not make or break, but it can really change your career as far as what job you get after graduation or like what companies want to hire you. And I think with accessibility with that, it comes down to a lot of paid versus unpaid internships, and kind of that already weeds out like who can actually even apply and then get the internship based on financial need or scheduling. I think there's maybe a bit of a lack of understanding of different backgrounds. Like some people can't afford to work 3 days a week unpaid for this company. And just having that expectation is really difficult, and it really only allows certain groups of people to kind of progress and get those leadership positions and kind of move forward in their career a lot faster than others, because of things that are just different in their life and something that they can't really control, but they still have this passion for fashion and they really like want to go for it. But these kind of obstacles and I would say like exclusion does make it difficult.
That's an excellent point. That's something that I always try to emphasize, is that even with a lot of companies, and they'll say it's for, credit or academic credit, you're still in a sense paying for that academic credit. And if you're deciding between, I have to work a full-time job and go to school part-time, or can I intern, that is already eliminated. So I think the idea of, if you can pay interns, that serves as an excellent way and kind of a first pathway into getting that experience to be able to put on your resume. So I'm so glad that you had brought up that point. So over the past few years, we have seen an incredible rise and wave of brands hiring diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. And I have always emphasized and said, as I think many other people, is that a single person cannot be responsible for changing or creating a company culture. What are your thoughts about how does a company or brand actually truly engage in incorporating representation in a genuine and sustainable way?
Okay, I'll go. Well, I feel like just again, it comes to a certain amount of like a lot of racism is just like built around like an ignorance. It's just that's just what it is. And the reason why representation is important is that more people get to see other people from different perspectives. Like if they'll, I don't know how many people that have maybe that are African American or that have gotten some said to them like, oh, well, you're really different, or you're not like, and it's like, well, if you're only watching television all the time and you only see like a certain perspective of a group of people, and you haven't really seen that there's a lot of, different types of people within that group, that right there is also what's like limiting you and your ability to see things. So, I mean, for me, I would say it's kind of like a meditation, and it's one that I even have to practice when I am meeting someone, to try not to have any judgments, you know? And I just try to, okay, this person's like this, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be like that, or they're going to do this to me, or they're going to be a certain way. I just try to have an approach that I don't know anything about this person, period. And it's not that easy to do, because we all have our own, preconceived notions of people, just, unfortunately, from the environment. But my whole thing is, I don't really care that much about what society says about things. And that's kind of like my design approach too. Like, I don't believe it. It's not really true to me. I have to have my own experience for me to believe something's true or not. And so I think the only way you can achieve that is if you're constantly teaching your workforce to kind of approach things with lightness and approach things with unknown, like you don't know everything. We all don't know everything, and just be willing to see people and talk about that. Don't make it so much individual, because we don't know anything about any group of people. We just really don't. And so I just think if people can just be more open and approach people and start practicing it, because actually you have to practice it. And you have to keep doing it, and you have to keep doing it to the point where you get to a place where you are open and you didn't think a lot of things before you met someone. And I think that that's a company culture that needs to be developed within, brands, and so that's what I say.
Yeah, and if I could add a little bit to that, with my last client, it was through Tel Santos. It was a financial client, financial services. So we were rethinking the whole brand, and we created collaboratively the blueprint of the brand, but we also did it for each individual. Of course, we didn't have everyone in the company, but we had about 12 people. And it took us time because we needed to understand where this person in this role comes from, who they really are. And we were, just as the maps that I developed for reverse engineering the brands, we did this to reverse engineering each individual. And then it helped other people to say, oh, this is why this person, these are their goals. This is what they're trying to do in their job. And how it gives more understanding, but also it gives the opportunity for more connection and collaboration, which is the open-mindedness that has been coming up here. But if we don't know, these people are now with Zoom and all this other distance, and you cannot even feel a warm body next to you in a meeting that you can read the room, it's really hard to implement that sort of awareness. So I think finding ways to create methods into how we can understand people better and where they're coming from, and team building is very critical.
Absolutely. Allison, any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think I really like what you said. It's really not one person's job, just hiring someone to be a head of like a diversity department. That's more just kind of visual, like, oh, we have that, like, we're good. The company kind of like checks that box. I think it really is everyone's responsibility, and kind of almost just like a constant thing to think of, just in every meeting or every design review, always being like, is this okay? Like, just asking a lot of questions and not being afraid to kind of bring up something that might make the process like even a little bit slower, but it's an important conversation to have along the way. And it really does start with every level, with every person, just bringing that open-minded approach. I think that's something that will make the most impact.
Absolutely. And I think also, just to add on to what you're saying, Allison, is when you're asking that person for their input, don't just ask them one time, make them part of that decision-making process. You just can't ask an intern who maybe is from the culture that you're being inspired by, what do you think? They should be incorporated into that full design process so that you're providing them with that equity, just not their opinion on one item or one project. So I could speak to the three of you for hours and hours, but we are going to be wrapping up. But I would love to talk about two more brief questions. One is, how do you stand out and make an impact, either when you're working within a large brand or when maybe you're collaborating with one? How do you stand out and make that impact? Mimi, it looks like you are.
Well, I wanted someone else to start this time. But how do you stand out when working in a collaboration? Well, the thing is, choosing who you collaborate with is also important. I think a lot of times, like, people feel forced into like let's say a couple years ago, I think Gucci had like this big old drama, and everybody was like forcing them to change, which you can do that too, but you can also make a choice to just deal with someone else, that does, appeal more to you and your thinking. You don't have to force a brand to apologize and you can just be done with them and not, put your money into a brand that you feel like is not, looking at you or respecting you or anything like that. Like I think that that's like a silent protest that can happen, and then you show how you feel about yourself to people and show what you're willing to take and what you're not willing to take from people. And so I just feel like when you're working with a brand that you feel like they're what they represent also reflects kind of what you represent. I think that that's a good choice, and never forcing yourself into a place where you don't really think that that brand aligns with what you do. I think that that's a good start, and I think that you just have to kind of be yourself, And I know that it's really hard because sometimes I do a lot of collaborations with much bigger brands, and you would think that, oh, well, I'm going to tone this down, I'm going to tone that down. But if the brand wants to work with you, most likely they want to work with you because of what you're bringing to the table. And so never be afraid to like share I know a lot of times, especially when I started working in scarification, the invitations I used to send out for my shows, they were of all these African bodies with really like crazy scars, like all over them. And people were like, are you sure you want to send that out to people? That's crazy. It looks like this and it looks like that. And that ended up being the collection we got the most recognition for ever. And I thought about it for a second. I was like, okay, well, maybe it's too crazy. They're going to think this. But I think it's scary to believe in yourself. And I know it's like a kind of a cliche thing to say that, but it's true though. I think it's hard to believe in yourself, when there's a lot of voices around you, especially when those voices are doing something different than what you want to do. And especially, as we've learned here for some people, when none of those things look like, what you want to do. But what I would say to people is just understand that even if you don't see anything that looks like what you're doing, it's okay. And maybe you're gonna maybe you're gonna be that new voice that no one's ever seen before, and you're gonna give that to someone else, And so always just approach things without hiding, and just be honest, And some people, your work won't really even be about culture, and that's okay too, And it's okay to just be who you are, and remember that no matter what, like you are putting yourself into everything. So if you come from whatever place, you're putting your energy into that anyway. So whatever it is, it's still your culture. Some part of it is still going to come out in everything that you do because you're you. So I just think that just try to approach things without fear, and try not to get caught up in other people's judgments if they start having them, and realize that that's not a reflection on you. You're your own person, you're your own being, and you have to be really, really tough and strong in who you are.
Excellent point.
I love what you were saying about like be yourself. I think that can't be said enough, especially in the industry where your personal style is something that is celebrated. I would say that I try to capitalize like on my differences, like what makes me different from the people around me, whatever environment I'm in, because that is kind of why I'm there, to bring like a new perspective, a new way of thinking, especially as, someone who's younger, like they want to hear something different, not just what they've been hearing all the time. And I think also it's good to remember that it's like fashion is fashion, clothes are clothes, but it's really great to connect with people and just really get to know them, their story, and kind of using that human connection and integrating it into your work. I think that's something that kind of gets lost sometimes because of like the materiality of like product and just getting kind of wrapped up in like fast timelines and seasonal calendars.
Yeah, and I'm so happy to be in this panel and to hear all these really inspiring designers and colleagues. And for me, I think the way to stand out is to continue to do my work when I had the most doubt, because I move in different worlds. I could be in a corporate environment. I could be in a total DIY space. I could be in an art setting. I could be with activists. So I think is being able, personally, sometimes I like to just also being able to listen and also understanding when to dial up and when to dial down, because I also want to hear other people's voices and to be able to learn from them. It's so critical. And I think when you have a good learner in a group, people really want to be around a good learner, because the good learners will bring a lot to the table, right? So yeah, it's a dance. But also when I get that fire, I was like, I need to speak up. I was like, then I go for it. It's like listening to higher inspiration. And it's difficult sometimes, meaning sometimes there are environments that it's all men, right? Not that men are scary, men are just like any individuals. But it could be intimidating because it's a different culture, right? And I personally say, like, sometimes I feel that they think I'm the dancing emoji. And, part of me might be that. But it's also knowing when to play with that image, but also knowing when to be like completely sharp. So having flexibility, I would say, being a good learner, being a good listener, and really hearing to the inner voice when it tells you, just go for it, even if you're so afraid that you might want to run the room. Maybe you're meant to be there because we're all in it together, and it's a learning process.
Excellent.
I think I'm going to add, sorry, that because Giana just actually made me think of it when I was just listening to you, because you did say collaboration, and I don't think when you said listening, the thing is, when you do a collaboration, right, you're bringing two brands together. So like that was like really, really key what you said about listening, because you're going to be telling your story and another story at the same time. So yeah, that's definitely key.
Absolutely. I think collaboration is so important, and the idea of listening and being an active listener is an excellent, excellent point. So just wrapping up, any last few words you would have on either advice to students entering into the industry, and in my opinion are the most vulnerable ones going out there, but have some of the strongest voices, or any advice you have to brands who are trying to figure out, where do I start? I think that you've given an excellent roadmap to a lot of companies and brands, but any last thoughts on advice for students or for companies?
I'll start. So Mimi doesn't have to go every time first. So I think it's a suggestion. And Ariele, your camera went off, by the way. Make decisions that truly take care of you, that take care of you financially, that take care of your well-being, because this is a long run. This is a marathon. And if you are not well taken care of, and this goes back to basic, good sleep, good friends, good art peers, you're not going to be able to withstand. This is not a one-time thing. This is, if you are in fashion or in the arts or in the creative industry, I compare it to being a doctor. You will always be in study because it's so influenced by technology. So my suggestion is make decisions that take care of you, so then you can you can materialize your creative endeavor.
Great. Allison and Mimi?
Yeah, I really love just talking more about prioritizing health and, getting sleep and not getting too wrapped up in like the hustle culture. I think that's something that it's so easy to get lost in as someone young, wanting to be really ambitious, getting really far, kind of hitting these milestones, promotions, achievements in like a really fast and like short time period. But I think as somebody looking at different companies, I would love if they kind of prioritize people and really investing in their employees and having like the bigger HR department. Because I've been in different settings where I see everyone around me, all the full-time people, they're kind of tired, not as motivated because there is not that investment in them and there's not like that valuing of what they're bringing to the company. And I feel like that it's not productive for them, it's not productive for the company. So I think having some sort of change and like a real commitment from like the leadership from the top will make everyone do better. And it's not just for the people, it's also for like the whole company. And I think that's a really good place to start.
Thank you. So important. And Mimi.
Everything that everyone said, and then just adding a little bit of, you know, when you this is a long game, and I'm somebody who started from being an intern, being an assistant, being a designer, being a head designer, then being a creative director, then being a VP of design, and then having my own company. I went through every single stage of what it was like to work for people. And what I would say is that the industry is very small, and so you do the whole thing about taking care of people is also like building your relationships and maintaining your relationships, and also just being open to things not really happening the way that you want them to. Like, I've come up with a lot of friends who've been up and down and people who've lost their businesses and things like that. And I think a lot of times we think that there's like this road where, oh, you're going to be in a magazine, and then when you're in Vogue, and then you're going to be this, and then you're going to have your line, and then you're going to be famous, and then you're going to have a clothing line. And it doesn't always really work like, well, it mostly probably will not work like that. And so I think if you can also understand that there's a lot of innovation to be had in this realm, and you can come into it in a totally different way than what you've ever seen. And if you can be open to that and be open to, okay, well, I might have gone left this time. It seems like everyone else is going right, but just understanding that it's not over. Sometimes people think if it didn't happen the way that they've seen it on TV or read about it in a magazine, and most brands don't really reach optimal success until it's been about 10 years or so, 10 to 12. So keep that in mind as well. You may blow up a lot faster, and if you don't, it doesn't matter, And what matters is that every single year, as time goes on, you get better and better and better. And then when you least expect it, you'll find yourself in a position that you wouldn't even know how you got there. And you'll be comfortable because you worked your way up into that, and you'll understand that, you deserve it. And I think, like, if you come into it like without any money, I didn't have any money. And so, like, and people think you can't absolutely do it without money. Well, you can, and it's going to be a lot more difficult, a lot more. But try not to focus on those things. Try to focus on, what is your story about? Like, I think too much times we think about design itself as, the clothes being fabulous. There's a lot of great designers. So if it's just the clothes looking good, I think you're going to have a little bit of trouble. And so it's not just about the clothes. It's about, what is your messaging and what story are you trying to tell? And is it unique enough and different enough to have a space for itself? And I think if you spend more time on that, especially if you're already talented, because no one's going to teach you how to really be a better designer. That comes from kind of you, but you'll learn better things about construction or things like that. But if you have that down and you're a good designer, then start thinking about, like, what's a story that I can get people to believe in? Because when people believe in a thing, that's when they want to buy products from you. And when they just think that you have great design, they'll come and look at it and be like, yay, it's beautiful. But for them to actually buy it and put it on their body, you have to have been there for a while and proven yourself and have a story that they can feel connects with them, and that they believe in. They want to use you as something to express, something on themselves, So it's not about you being fabulous, it's about you making other people feel fabulous.
Oh, brilliant advice from the three of you. And something in a book that I would recommend and that we use in my class, something that was brought to me through FIT, is the book Expand Beyond Your Current Culture: Diversity and Inclusion for CEOs and Leadership by Leslie Short. So if you are looking for where to start, she literally gives probably the most easiest breakdown of what to do, where to start, and how to get beyond just checking off the boxes. So I'd like to thank the three of you for joining in this incredible conversation, wonderful advice, and also to everybody from the Sustainability Council for putting together such an important panel. It's been a pleasure, and thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.